Get out there and blast.
Get out there and blast.
Guys,
Come on, Rick, get out there and blast.
appreciate it. Get out there and blast.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, you're not going to say it?
Get out there and blast. Let's
Get
go.
out there and blast.
Blue Dog Radio. Get out there and blast. Or whatever. I don't care.
All right, guys, and welcome to another Blue Dog Radio podcast. Don't know which episode we're on. We just kind of make them up as we go along, but we do have two special guests for you today. So we are stepping up the game. Two guests instead of one. They are both from the same company, though. We are talking with Rick Miller, the VP of Sales and Distribution, Southeast Asia and the Western U.S., as well as Jeff Furton, the Director of Specialty Sales over at Strategic Materials, which is also called TruAbrasives. And that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on, is the TruAbrasive side of Strategic Materials. And so welcome, guys. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good to be here.
First off, let's just kind of get into you guys a little bit. Maybe start with Rick. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in the industry and how you got started over at Tru, and go from there.
Well, let's see. How far should I go back? I won't go back before most people were born, so I'll keep to the short version. Been in industrial sales. First job in industrial sales was in 1978, so I just dated myself a little bit there. Got into the abrasive side of things in 1986, working for a major distributor of loose grain abrasives, aluminum oxide, brown aluminum oxide, for investment castings and grinding of titanium for the aerospace industry. From there, managed a distributorship for a number of years, and then many years ago went to work for one of the major Garnet companies here in the US. And in 2017, made the jump to TruAbrasives. I've always known that glass was a great abrasive from my time in the Garnet business. It was a fairly easy competitor to work against because there just wasn't supply at the time. It was very regional. So in 2017, Strategic wanted to go more mainstream and have more capacity, and that's when I made the jump to Strategic, and that was in 2017.
Jeff, how about you? I see that you're the Director, Specialty Sales.
Well, I've been at Strategic Materials for about 3 years now, and really the specialty sales side of Strategic Materials is anything that doesn't really go back into the bottle or the container industry or the fiberglass insulation industry. So really specialty for us is the abrasives industry. And then the other thing that we focus on is a small portion of our business, American Specialty Glass out of Salt Lake City. And then we've got an Indianapolis plant that produces what we would call terrazzo chips, mirror chips, clear chips that get put into terrazzo floors like airports, hospitals, universities, and then countertops and things like that. And so I transitioned over to Strategic Materials because it was a really similar footprint in terms of the companies that we're calling on: oil and gas industry, heavy fabrication industry, pipeline infrastructure, and things like that. So it was a pretty good fit for me about 3 years ago when I made the move.
Yeah, I know a question that comes up a lot to me is, and I get this quite a bit, is how long, well, first of all, how long has Strategic been providing the crushed glass? And is crushed glass considered kind of a new abrasive in the mobile industry? I know Strategic Materials has been around for over 100 years. TruAbrasive brand, I guess, is kind of new to some people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can take that one, Rick. I mean, really, sure. We've been in the recycling business for quite some time, really focused on the glass market and making acquisitions over the years from Strategic Materials perspective. It wasn't until probably 2008 or so when we decided to acquire a company that probably the East Coast is more familiar with than anything else, a company called New Age Blast Media and Novitas Solutions. So they were the first ones to really kind of take recycled glass and crush it down into the sizes that you would need for abrasive blasting. And so over time, basically we bought them in 2015. They started in 2008. And so since 2015, we've been looking at our operations that make a pretty good transition to move into the abrasive side of the business from those plants, and just really started growing our capacity from that perspective. But it was New Age Blast Media that started, and then we did the name change in probably 2017 or so, probably shortly after Rick got here, when we started transitioning everything to the brand TruAbrasives, which is where we currently stand.
You guys have quite a few plants for the actual packaging, I guess, manufacturing packaging of the TruAbrasives. I was actually out in Wilson. I'm in North Carolina, in the Cary, Raleigh area, out at the Wilson plant yesterday. In addition to Wilson, how many different plants do you have that carry the TruAbrasives crush glass?
So we got 9 different plants across the US that actually manufacture it. And really, we're constantly looking at different operations to figure out where we can kind of go from a major metropolitan marketplace, because obviously logistics matter in this business. So the closer you are to those customers to reduce that freight footprint is kind of what matters. So we're constantly looking at them, but right now we've only got 9 facilities kind of strategically located across the US.
I'd also like to add that we have approximately 50 processing facilities across the country, with 9 of those being abrasive plants, in addition to supplying cullet back to the container industry from those same locations.
These processing plants, like I know in Wilson, everything I know about your facilities and processing centers is based off of the Wilson plant. I actually have a customer in there, the glass company makes the Budweiser bottles. They're quite a bit. You guys, I guess, get a lot of the crushed bottles from there. Is that correct? And does that make up a big portion of what you guys get over there at the Wilson plant? What kind of area?
There's recovery facilities, which is what all of us would associate with curbside recycling. So we have business aligned with those guys where we take back that recycled product from Waste Management, Republic Group, those kind of guys. And then there's also, manufacturers that make bottles like OI and Gallo, Budweiser, all the major bottling companies that we take what you'd call decase materials. So if they have a manufacturing defect in that run, they will set a lot on one side of it versus the other side, and everything in between that gets sent back to us, because if you pressurize that bottle in the line, it will actually explode. So it's more economical for them to take that lot of bottles out of the system than shut their production facility down. So we have that decase bottle as well. So anything glass recycled, we'd love to take. We're working with programs from a state and a municipal perspective of trying to increase that exposure on recyclability, because glass is 100% recyclable. So the packaging institutes that we're a part of and all the associations really kind of focus on glass packaging versus the alternatives.
This was something I was kind of get to later on, but after somebody uses your crushed glass, are there recycle programs where it can go back and be repurposed again?
Not really too much of an option from there, because one, if you're removing coatings in our industry, a lot of surface prep is coatings removal and everything. And it's a single pass abrasive. It's very similar to slags in weight and hardness. So after you use the material, it's pretty fine. So recovering it and then extracting all the whatever it is you just blasted out of that mix would be pretty costly.
Yeah.
So it's basically disposed of as you would any other single pass abrasive.
All right. So yeah, I want to back up a little bit. Sorry, John, did I just interrupt you? I'm seeing a little freeze on yours. So yeah, I just wanted to back up a little bit and kind of explain how this all came about. Rick, I'm guessing it was probably about a month ago. I had gotten a call. I'm in sales. I was on the road, and I got a call from a former rep for Blast One, who I've known for years. Let's just call this person Bob. So Bob had hired one of my customers who's a mobile blaster, wanted them to remove a coating off a part, a bunch of parts, recoat it. I would be done. Well, I got the call, and Bob's a little concerned that his workers were exposed to silica, and they're going to have silicosis because they were in the area. They're stepping on the spent abrasives for the next couple of days, weeks, years, whatever. So I got really nervous about that. The fact that somebody who's been in our industry, for a couple of years would have that thought in their head. So I reached out to Rick, knowing him from on LinkedIn. He engages a lot, puts out a lot of really good stuff there, and just had this kind of germ of an idea of, hey, let's get on and do a short little interview and talk about the crushed glass product and try to inform people a little bit about it, those who don't know that much. And it kind of snowballed into the Blue Dog podcast from there. So my actual question is, can you tell us a little bit about how the recycled glass you use is made?
Yeah, first, let me tell you, that's a very common question people have, because think about this for a second. It's glass.
Mm-hmm.
What's the main raw material used in
Sand.
Silica sand?
Yeah.
So everybody's going, oh, it's silica sand. My gosh, it's silicosis. It's going to kill you. Well, when you melt, here's a very short version. I won't get into the Bill Nye Science Guy version of this thing. When you melt the materials, especially silica sand, because there's lime and soda ash and all this other stuff that goes into it. But when you melt it, it changes the crystalline structure of the material. And it takes it from a crystalline silica to an amorphous silica through the heating melting process. Slags that we're all familiar with in this industry are also amorphous silica products. So when it goes through that process of melting and reconstituting that crystalline silica becomes amorphous silica. And as we all know, amorphous silicas are virtually free of free crystalline silica.
Yeah.
And so it's a real common question that we're asked, because everybody goes, well, it's silica sand over here when you make it. Why isn't it over here when you use it? It's because of, at the molecular level, it's changed when it goes through the melting process.
Gotcha. Well,
I hope that's understandable.
Yes, definitely. That's a way to clear it up. And I don't know, I've done my research just being in the industry on the silica, and it sounds like silica is actually used quite a bit for health purposes, for women's skin, hair, nails, stuff like that. And it's just, I guess it all depends on how it gets into you.
Well, yeah, the bad thing about silica dust, free silica, crystalline silica dust, is that they classify it as not respirable. That means if you, again, a short version, you magnify it, it's got these hooks and whatever at the molecular level that when they get in your lungs, they penetrate the tissue of the lungs, and your lungs can't move that material. And as it does move around, it scars the lungs. Mm-hmm. Whereas amorphous silica dust, it's classified as a nuisance dust. It is respirable. It will move and come out of the lungs. You can respirate the dust.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I was a little confused on that. I've always read that, it gets in your lungs, it dies, and that scar tissue that builds around it is what leads eventually to silicosis. And I always assumed, gosh, wouldn't just about any dust kind of, but now that you've explained it, it makes sense to me. So
yeah, and that like 2 or 3 years ago is when all the the silica rules really came into effect, and it's based just around silica dust, and all the rules came in, grinding, all the construction rules came into play, and silica dust is the thing that you need to control.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go lay on the beach
That
and
was
roll
kind of
around in sand all you want. You're going to be fine.
So Sean's gonna hop inside the house to get his internet going a little bit better. We just talked about the silicosis. That brings up something I was interested to ask Rick. Rick, you spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, or you at least used to before COVID. First, I wanted to know, how has COVID impacted your traveling? And two, as far as regulations go over there, how do they differ from here in the US?
Well, yeah, COVID has definitely impacted my travel. My last travel was in October and November of 2019 overseas.
Mhm.
And I visited Malaysia, Indonesia, China, and Qatar at that time. And since then, they've been locked down tighter than a drum.
Yeah.
It looks like travel may reopen in most of the area over there in starting in the third quarter, which would be July 1. And we've got some really good things working over there that we need to resume and pick back up on. The investment in LNG, oil and gas in that entire region is pretty dramatic right now. So they're gonna see a huge uptick in investment, which is great for the surface prep industry. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of cool stuff you've been engaging on LinkedIn with those people that work over there.
Yeah, talking about how the industry differs over there from here, there's not really that much difference, because you're talking really the same majors all around the world. You've got Shell, Exxon, Conoco, Phillips, BP. They're all over there. You've got some regional players over there that you don't see here in the Gulf or in the States. You've got Petronas Oil and Gas, you've got Hess, you've got some of the maintenance companies that you don't see here. Well, I guess you would see Hess a little bit in the Gulf. But the standards are pretty strict, and they're pretty much the same. The specifications that govern the industry over there are basically ISO, but NACE plays a real heavy role in that region. It's not uncommon to be in a fabrication yard over there, and you're testing your material, and you've got half a dozen, maybe 10 NACE 3s, couple NACE 4s that are right there with you testing and doing everything they can to make sure that your stuff does what it says it does. And they're very strict. They're very by the book. There's no cutting corners. Everything is straight down the line. So it's a lot of my friends in the industry have said, well, over there, are they as technologically skilled as we are? And all that I got to say is, you don't get away with nothing.
Yeah,
over there. They are by the book, and they're highly skilled. Yeah.
I guess it's ignorant of me to have this idea in my head, but I just imagined it would be kind of like a free for all.
Well,
outside the US.
I think there's markets like that, but I don't think Southeast Asia is one of them, because they're so heavily focused on oil and gas. They're just like the Houston and Louisianas regarding corrosion protection, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you'll see some yards over there that, you sort of look the other way, you may not have your cable ties on your hoses, and, you just, I've seen a feed hose to a pot come off.
Oof.
See somebody jump 20 feet in the air to avoid the hose. I can't personally jump 20 feet in the air, but but when you get onto the major sites like McDermott, the Shells, that kind of stuff, everything it's prime.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a lot of questions about it, and I think just with the ignorance, I had a lot of questions about how things were going to go over there as a sales guy. Like you'd be feasting over there. It's just like anybody who can get over there and sell the product would be, selling it, because oil and gas, like you said, is real big.
It's tough. It's tough to get into that market over there, especially with crushed glass being what I call relatively new to the industry. Even though it's been around for, say, 18 years, it's still new to the industry.
Yeah.
And to get, this industry like I do, to get people to switch something is pulling teeth.
Especially in those industries.
It really is. So, I mean, your sales cycle could be a year.
Yeah.
From your first introduction to your follow-up to the possibility of getting a blast test and then getting a blast test, performing your blast test, analyzing the data, let's do a sample order, and then you finally get to supply. And it can be quite long.
You really got to qualify your projects there, because that 30-hour flight, the boss isn't going to like it if you're going over there for some pipe dream project that.
Yeah. Well, the upside to that is when you do the calculations on how much material is going to be used over the next 5 years, it would blow your mind.
Yeah.
It's like there is so much work that's going to be done in the next few years over there. The global supply of abrasive is going to be stretched.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
If everything comes to fruition, like
if everything comes
right. I mean, it all depends on COVID and if everything goes from a capital perspective or they start putting stuff on the shelf. But it's to Rick's point, it's going to be challenging for the entire abrasives industry, let alone just one provider.
And who are you guys competing with over there as far as abrasives for most of those types of jobs?
Well,
as far as what type of abrasive are you usually going up against out there?
It's really very similar to the market here in the States. Regionally, it's a little different over there. For instance, in the Singapore is big with shipbuilding and ship repair.
Mm-hmm.
The main abrasive used in Singapore is copper slag.
Yeah.
You get into Indonesia, outside of oil and gas, silica sand is by and large the biggest abrasive used in Indonesia. And the Indonesian market is huge. You've got a population base of, I don't know, 400 million in Indonesia. And there is a lot of surface prep done outside of oil and gas, and the bulk of that is silica sand. You get into oil and gas, and it's pretty heavy into garnet. That's been a mainstay, but that's being stressed.
Yeah.
You have some lower quality garnets coming from some places in the world. The India is not the supplier that it used to be for reasons that are pretty widely known in the industry. So the garnet supply is being stretched. Mm-hmm. And that's given us access to that market. Cool.
It looks like we got Sean back. Can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep. Looks like you sound better. Just to recap, we were talking to Rick was talking about Southeast Asia, kind of the market over there. A lot of stuff going on, oil and gas, the restrictions, everything over there seems to be heavily regulated like it is here. Did I say something wrong on this at all? Let me know.
No, because OSHA's global, isn't it?
No, OSHA is not. OSHA is US. But what governs most of the specifications is ISO, and most everybody adheres to NACE standards.
Gotcha.
NACE and ISO are interchangeable to the market, the corrosion protection market.
Kind of caught the tail end where you were talking about garnet. Since garnet kind of comes from that region, I would suppose that's probably the go-to for sandblasting abrasives over there.
It is a go-to abrasive, But most of the abrasive, most of the Garnet abrasive is still coming out of South Africa and some out of Australia. So everything is still shipped into that region. You've got suppliers that are supplying out of China. That's usually a slightly lower grade of Garnet because it's a crushed material versus an alluvial, you know, sand dune type of Garnet, which the South African is. But the quantities that are used in that area are such that it puts stress on the supply chain. And that's why other abrasives are you know, taking a foothold.
You mentioned copper slag, Sean.
Yeah.
It's big over there.
Okay.
Indonesia?
It mainly in shipyards, especially Singapore. Yeah. And when you get up into shipyards, even in the marine industry, whether it's Malaysia, Southeast Asia, or even in the Middle East, when you're in shipyards, copper slag is used quite a bit.
I was just going to say, I know one of the, I guess you could call it a strategic move by you guys by using the crushed glass. What you're doing is taking material that's already been created and processed, aka sand, going into glass, taking that, crushing it down, and using it as an abrasive as a recycled material. Whereas all of the slags, all the garnets, all that stuff that's mined material specifically, well, specifically and non-specifically for the sandblasting industry. So that kind of pigeon foots you into a few more doors that you're a recycled material instead of a processed material, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we try and advocate for is that, listen, we're not only a high performance abrasive now that we've got the capacity to you know, provide the marketplace from a production standpoint, but we're also that clean green initiative, right? If you think about recycling in general, people want to know that when they're putting stuff in their recycling bin, that it's actually being repurposed. So we repurpose a lot of it back into the fiberglass industry, like I talked about, as well as the glass container industry. But where we can't get it into those markets because of its small size, that's when we take it to our side of the business and then cut it how we want regarding mill profile, right? And then getting that back into the marketplace. So we're using every amount of that recycled content that we can get and repurposing it. So this is just one of those ways that we repurpose that glass bottle that gets recycled.
Yes, this is as good a time as any to talk about. I wanted to kind of, so I sell Garnet, I sell crushed glass, all the slags, everything. And I noticed a lot of the Garnet users are switching to either a crushed glass or something like a 10X. And my big thing has always been the whole mining aspect of the Garnet. You guys, I know it's not great for the environment. I know a lot of it's coming from outside of the US. I would think that crushed glass, and we kind of touched on it, would have a huge advantage here, especially with your safety and EHS departments. Can you shed any light on, you know, the effects of the mining process and why we're not moving away?
Yeah, I think reflecting on that it's sort of opinion based in my mind, rather than, you know, there's facts and data, but here's my 30,000 foot view. To supply Garnet, it only comes from a couple sources. One is a hard rock source, and you have to blow up the ground and crush the material and extract the Garnet. That's a pretty big footprint on Mother Earth.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of material that you don't use when you blow up the ground and you extract the whatever percentage of the Garnet is in the substrate. And then, you know, you have a huge tailings pile, which is another big mountain. No matter where you manufacture Garnet from, that's a hard rock. You blow up the ground and you extract the Garnet. Yeah. To me, in my opinion, that's a pretty intensive carbon footprint. You know, it's not a recycled or eco-friendly way to do it. On the sand dune type garnet that is prevalent in southeastern India, eastern India for that matter, you just literally scoop up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tons of beach dunes, and you process those and you pull out what you want to pull out. That's what led to the shutdown in India a few years back, and which has led to, you know, the supply issues we have now today coming out of that part of India. Mining was, you know, there's been a lot of articles written on it. There's court cases in India, a lot of illegal mining where they've just literally trashed the seaboard. So again, not friendly to the environment, and you know, a pretty good carbon footprint. You're running loaders, you're doing all that kind of stuff. Where you look at a material like ours, or the crushed glass abrasive industry in general, it's a material comes from it's a beneficial reuse material. And it has the same physical properties basically as a lot of your other abrasive, like slags. So when it has those physical properties and it comes from a beneficial reuse process, why wouldn't you use something like that? Yeah. Again, that's opinion, but I when I'm out in the field and talking to people, a lot of people tend to agree.
Yeah, I would say to a degree, opinion, yes, maybe, but there's a lot of fact in that.
Yeah, and you know, you don't want to point fingers here and there about, you know, that company's doing this and that company's doing that. Just in an overall perspective, what can you do to protect Mother Earth and still provide something for an industry that they need?
Yeah.
And that performs exceedingly well.
We don't have any shortage of crushed glass here, do we?
No, and I mean, Jeff could touch on how much glass is generated in the US and how much is actually processed. It's crazy.
But that kind of brings me to one of the myths that I wanted to talk about is everybody who's not, I guess, a rep for or selling the crushed glass says it's a really dusty abrasive. And I'm just curious. I've tested it a lot. I've actually done it in cabinet settings at lower pressures just to see comparison between stuff like garnet and slag in kind of a confined area. You guys have any special processing, wash, cooking, burning, melting, whatever you need to do to clean that stuff up before it becomes that abrasive?
Yeah, so if you can imagine the acquisition of all these plants over the years, right, of the 100 years that we've been in business, it becomes interesting because what you think is the same at one facility is different than another facility. And then obviously the collection of all those products, right? So we have lots of things that we do depending on the facility to clean it up. And then obviously the supply, the in-feed that you get to actually make the final abrasive product sort of matters. So we get out all the plastics and the metals and things like that. And again, you have to realize it's a recycled product. So we do the absolute best that we can do. We continue to look at ways to make it better, to reduce the dust like you're talking about, Kevin. And really that dust is really those fine particles in the crushing process that we try and get out of there. So we've increased our specifications in regards to our tolerances on the high side and the low side of what we'll accept in that range of, say, a 40-70 cut or a 20-40 cut to reduce those dust fines or dusty particles. The main thing we find when Rick and I and our other guys go out there and do blast tests is people run it at really high pressures. So if you think about throwing a beer bottle against a wall, right? If you're blasting this stuff at 110 PSIs, you actually may be pushing too much force out of it where it's really frying the particle as it hits that substrate and is creating more dust than what needs to be. So really what we want to do is we want to meter back how much flow is coming through that pot to the line. And then also, we also want to reduce the pressure. really between 90 and 100 PSI is where glass works really good. But so we're investing in those operations, short answer, to try and get the most refined product that we can, realizing that it is recycled, and we do the best job that we can to get good quality product out to the customers.
Yeah, and
And
if I might
ahead,
add to
Rick.
that really quick, over the last couple of years, we've made some really heavy investments into our two flagship plants, the new plant in Houston and the Commerce, California facility. We've invested several $1 million in each of those, one to build a new plant in Houston, one to build a new production line in Commerce. And the new production lines are producing a material that is best in class. We've got new processes, new equipment, new negative air filtering, all kinds of stuff to make the product as good as it possibly can be in our current process. And we're about ready to enter a new process in one of those plants that will have the best material possible. And we'll announce that when it happens. I don't want to get into what that process is right now, but we'll have best in class material. Let me talk about dusting for a second.
Okay.
And Jeff hit on really the science behind blasting in general and the science behind using glass. Just about everybody in the industry is going to tell you, Garnet's the best abrasive out there. Well, I'll agree to that if you run it the way it needs to be ran.
Yeah.
And the typical job site, 99 times out of 100, you're not going to be on a job site that runs Garnet the way it needs to be ran. Usually you can't. There's companies out there that specialize in selling Garnet, and they'll do blast tests, and they'll set the material up. They'll do your blast test, and they'll set the material up, and it'll run amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be at 120 PSI nozzle pressure.
Yeah.
How many job sites do you go on where they have 120 PSI at the nozzle?
No, there's not many. And
I've been on job sites that you're pumping out 70 PSI at the nozzle.
Yeah.
You're
Go ahead,
going to try to push heavy Garnet at 70 PSI.
And is that considered optimizing? And I definitely want to get into optimization of the crushed glass, but is that 120 PSI really where the sweet spot is for Garnet, where you start to see that?
Yes, it is. If you could run Garnet all day long at 115, 120 PSI, and we're talking at the nozzle. So if you're on a job site, you've got 150 feet of hose from the blast pot. What kind of compressor do you have to hit 120 PSI at that nozzle? And then if you got two hoses, you got a big, huge Schmidt pot or something, and you're running 6 hoses. What's your nozzle pressure going to be?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be 120.
It's definitely not. And Sean and I have done a bunch of tests, and this is something else I was going to get into. I've done a bunch of testing, I said, inside the cabinets just to see the dust. But we've compared Slags, crushed glass, Garnet, stuff like 10X. And Garnet typically at 100 to 105 PSI, kind of that sweet spot we're in, is equal or slower as far as production as the others. And it just shocks me that Garnet is just so popular outside my little area.
It's I work with distributors that I've worked with for 25 years. Yep. And almost every distributor I work with, those damn Garnet guys, they just got this thing, because guys that have been in the industry a long time know how Garnet's supposed to be ran. And going back 25 years ago, the Garnet guys would come out to the job site, set up their test, and blow your socks off. Mm-hmm. And then the next day or the next week, you're at your own job site, and you've got your own equipment, and you start blasting. You're not going to capture your data. You already tested last week.
There's the
So
headline.
you're assuming you're getting the same results.
Yep. There's
you
the
never do.
headline, testing your own equipment.
Right. It has to be real world. So getting back to glass, the sweet spot based on the specific gravity of the material and the hardness. The sweet spot of glass is 95 to 100 PSI. We say 90 to 100, but we actually get better performance out of our glass at 100 PSI than we do at 90.
Okay.
Yeah. So anywhere between 90 and 100 PSI, I've got data that we've had third-party testing done that shows we actually get higher productivity and lower consumption than Garnet.
Yeah. So we're on this topic. Let's talk optimization of crushed glass. We're here. Let's do it. So we're talking 90, 100 PSI. Is there any type of equipment that worked especially well with the crushed glass? What's like nozzles, hoses, anything? What's the optimal setup to get the most out of the crushed glass?
Well, first I want to say that you don't need any special equipment. It's a blast abrasive like basically any other in the industry. You can use any equipment, you currently have, dump crushed glass in there and you can blast. What we do say is because glass visually is different than other abrasives, it looks different. It's not dark black like copper slags and coal slags. And it doesn't have that dark purple color that some of your garnets have. When you're blasting with it, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they want to see the stream.
Yep.
You know, maybe they're used to blasting with copper slag, and you got that dark trace of a stream. When you're blasting with glass, you want to be going, wow, is there anything coming out? Yeah, I think I see it, because glass is basically translucent.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome that I mean, you're not the first one to talk about optimization, and I think in an industry that's been around for forever, in materials that have been around forever. I mean, we're using, people are still using sand. I mean, go out to the backyard and scoop some sand, throw it into a pot, you know, so not a whole heck of a lot has changed in this industry, but it certainly seems like as of late, people are showing those optimizations, saying, we're providing you glass. It's a little bit different than the other materials. Here's how to dial it in and be perfect with it. And that really shows the difference of abrasives across the board. And I've yet to see like a chart where you just Google optimized pressures and settings for crushed glass. There's nothing out there. So it's great that companies like you are doing that.
Well, yeah, and it's really, you know, you got to have a feel for your own equipment. So you just have a general concept of, this is what it looks like. Here's your pressure, but here's what it looks like when you're metering the flow. Overflowing glass will kill you, just like it would, you know, any other
Every other one.
Slow you down. Everything just jams up in the hose. You know, everything's running into everything else. So it's all about metering is really the key. If you have your pressures, you know, you've got enough compressor and you have your pressures, it's all about metering.
Which metering valve would you say is most user friendly? It could be for any abrasive.
Well, I don't want to get into, you know, this guy's valve is the best, you should buy his or whatever, because we don't, you know, we're not in that market. Yeah. I can optimize your blasting.
Okay.
No matter what valve you have.
Everybody's got an opinion on the style, and I'm always curious of that, because it seems everybody is completely different on which one they like better. I mean, I'm so used to the Empire style with the pinch tube, and then you got the people who like the Thompson valve. They like to be able to see where their setting is and mark it.
Right. Well, I like to be able to know, you know, once you get used to your valve, you know about how many turns you should get. And then if you know the abrasive you're using, you should be able to see the stream.
Yeah.
So, you know, blasters really know their own equipment. So if they understand what to look for when they're using glass, you can basically adjust any system to run glass really well. Yeah. I do like a Venturi style nozzle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty much standard.
Yep. Yep.
You know, any blast pop purchase these days, it's going to come with your standard long venturi, probably a number 5.
Yep. Absolutely.
But you guys are, it seems to be glass is quite popular in the wet blast systems.
Well, yeah, I mean, we designed our, it's turning out, I don't know if all the plants this year are finding this, but I work in the West region, and 4070 is our main vapor blast grade, and it is off the charts this year for usage. It's crazy. And we designed that grade specifically for vapor blasting.
Yeah, I was just watching the dustless blasting video where they're talking about abrasives, and they did I lock up? Am I good now?
A
A little bit.
Okay. Then, I was just watching last night the dustless blasting video where they talk about which abrasives to use, and they pretty much say crushed glass is perfect to, you know, for a wide variety of stuff. And, you know, keep it at 4070, don't go lower because it doesn't settle as well. But typically when I run into or talk to people who are really heavy on the garnet side of things, they typically say when somebody asks them, what's crushed glass good for? Say, it's good for concrete or if you have a dustless blast system. So here's the opportunity for you guys to tell us where does crushed glass really shine? Where are you seeing, what does your customer base look like? Give us the whole range there.
Okay, that's one of the myths that I wanted to talk about in this podcast. Is it's really common for people in this industry to think, oh, crushed glass, you can use it on concrete, you can use it in, you know, wastewater treatment jobs, that kind of stuff, and wet blasting. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm here to tell you that when you optimize it and you blast at 100 psi and you optimize your metering, we get equal to or better productivity than garnet and lower consumption on new steels, cold rolled steel with mill scale and coating removal than garnet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just at a couple blast tests last week in Arizona, and we were doing these huge plates. It was a test, and we were doing huge plates that they're going to use for water tanks. And we started out with a 3060 garnet, went to our 1020 coarse material, and then to our 2040. And we literally got more consistent profile. We had equal to speed as the garnet, and the garnet couldn't get a 3 profile. It was, and that all has to do with physics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're running 95 psi, and you're throwing out a heavy abrasive. It's not doing its work when it's hitting the substrate.
Yeah.
It looked like it was working, but it had low profile, low productivity, and we performed so much better. So it's not true that we're not a go-to abrasive. We can be used on just about any application. Aluminum, I mean, it's endless. It's a go-to abrasive, and it's just so new that people still have that misconception.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I've been doing a lot of testing lately on the profiles, and garnet, I hear a lot about how it's got a high bulk, but it's 140 pounds per cubic foot.
Give or take, yep.
I hear people throw around it's very friable. Isn't friable just means it doesn't break down as quickly, but
friable has to do with the hardness.
Okay.
And how easy the grain will break down.
Mm-hmm.
Glass is more friable than the harder garnet. So when that particle impacts the surface, if you're blasting at 90 psi with a hard, heavy piece of material, and if you don't have it going at the proper speed, it's not going to break down.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that kinetic energy imparted to the surface.
So what about with like silicon carbide that's very hard and it breaks down faster than an aluminum oxide.
Well, what kind of pressures are you pushing at?
100 psi.
Yeah, and one breaks down faster than the other.
Yeah,
And what's the hardness difference?
one on the mode scale, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's a linear scale,
8
which
to
means
9.
this one's harder than that one. So it's hard to say how much harder it is.
I don't trust any. That's what was going to be one of the things I wanted to ask you, is tell us a bit about the hardness of the crushed glass, because I can look in 10 different places and get 9 or 10 different numbers as far as your bulk density. I've heard things as low as 65, 70 pounds per cubic foot, all the way up to 110 pounds per cubic foot.
Well, again, it depends on the type of glass, but we're around 80, 90 pounds. Our hardness is anywhere to, it's a 6 plus, which is really right in the same range as most of your slags are. So, but when people are talking 6, 7, 8, whatever, they're talking Mohs scale. And all that the Mohs scale does is say, okay, the hardest one is diamond.
Yeah.
And the softest one is what? Diatomaceous earth or something. I forget what it is.
Let's just call it peanut butter.
Peanut butter. So the scale is just linear. It's like this one's harder than that one's harder than this one.
Yeah.
So when me and a former colleague worked at the same company years ago, he's a science guy. He was really big on what you call Knoop hardness. And that's actually an actual hardness measurement rather than just linear. One is harder than the other. And you can really see how much, because when you say, well, this one is 6.5 and Garnet is 7.5, it doesn't sound like a lot. Garnet is like between 1,500 and 1,600 on the Knoop scale, where we're way less than that, and so are the slags. So just in general, what that tells you is that garnet particle has to be accelerated dramatically higher than slags and glass.
Yeah.
To get the same reaction on the substrate.
Is there any kind of chart that breaks that down, the extra energy needed to move? Something that has a higher bulk density and hardness to it?
There probably is. I don't have one. I don't have a scale. I just have my working knowledge of, you got to really accelerate this. That's why Garnet, its optimum is 115, 120 PSI at the nozzle to get that acceleration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That explains a lot of the results I've been seeing recently about, Garnet just basically tying everything else when those pressures down at 80, 90 PSI.
Yeah. The test I was on last week, it was really apparent that one, they had to run it at higher pressure in order to get the profile, but it really does depend too. With Garnet, you have to have a really, really high quality source of material. Because there's a lot of garnets on the market these days that are in the mid 80s as far as purity goes. So you got 10 or 15% of other junk in the bag that's not doing any work for you.
Yeah.
Actually, depending on who you buy it from, we've seen more than that.
Yeah, exactly. And when you buy a 50-pound bag of glass, you got 50 pounds of glass in the bag.
It's glass. There's glass in there.
It's glass.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's glass. Yep.
Hey, Rick, the other thing I want to mention when you talk about optimization from Kevin's question, the underlying thing that I've seen in the market, as well as our other guys and what you witnessed last week, is the post-blast finish. And one of the amazing things about crushed glass, and we did our own testing down in Houston, we took our product as well as all the competitive products, and ours was in the first square. And just noticing the white metal finish from a straight, you don't have to clean it, you don't have to do anything with it after the fact. Our post-blast finish, garnet, slags, sand, even was amazing. And that's the thing that Rick, and we constantly get is, how come you haven't brought this stuff to us before? Because there's no washing it down after the fact. And I'm talking on bare metal steel, right? When you're just removing that mill scale, and then even coatings. that's the thing that really gets these guys when Rick's converting them from XYZ product, or a lot of our other guys that are out there doing it, is that white metal finish. They're really sort of amazed because of that translucent dust that we were talking about before,
Yep.
versus that dark stream that comes out of the nozzle. When you talk about efficiency from a job site perspective, if you don't have to wash it down, you don't have to, air hose it off to get some of that residue dust off. We've heard of tank manufacturers saying that's one less process I don't even have to mess with now.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about that diversity of it being an abrasive, whether it's wet or dry application versus a niche product like we've traditionally been perceived in the marketplace, it's no longer that. So it's just a matter of us sort of getting in front of customers and opening up eyes more than anything else.
It's one of those products you have to see. And I experienced this last week. Is I have a customer, gosh, twice in the last 2 weeks maybe, that have used slag for years and years. And, I feel a responsibility to my customer base, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but there's a product that I think might check off more boxes for them. I'm going to put it in front of them, whether it costs more or costs less, and let them try it and make that decision on their own. And they were shocked, first of all, how clean the surface was when they were done blasting. I think I mentioned the fact that there was, they were able to dial it in, use a lot less abrasive. And the last thing, which was the first time I've heard this, is the blowback. There was far less blowback as far as the abrasive coming back and hitting their operator than there was
Rebound. Yep. Yep. Yeah, and that goes back to the science. If you're blasting at a good enough pressure to get the abrasive to fry, you're going to eliminate a lot of that bounce back. If you're blasting with a hard, heavy material and you don't have the pressures to break it down, where's it going to go?
Yeah.
It's going to bounce back.
It's going to come back at you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I just want to touch on what Jeff was just talking about, surface finish. Every time I show a painting contractor, somebody, when we test our material and we're blasting, whether it's new steel or coating removal, whatever, the very first thing that they comment about is the surface finish, how bright the finish is. And several of the guys that I've converted over the last year have said, wow, that hardly takes any effort to get SP5.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, yeah, that's the beauty of it. I mean, you don't have to dwell hardly at all to hit SP5. So,
well, yeah. Rick's actually got a funny story on that too. We converted a customer away in the West region there, and an inspector came up and did a tape test. Right, when you're doing the NACE thing, they want to see how much is it actually adhering. He said, guys, we can't use this abrasive because I can't see it on the tape.
Oh,
no. And when you would use a slag before,
yeah,
like, well, I can see it.
Yeah.
And so even the inspector was like, we can't use this because I can't see.
How do I know there's no dust on the surface?
You're going to have to start dyeing it.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to have to start making black
That was
tape.
one where our cleanness sort of hurt us, actually.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I was talking to the project manager there, and he said, I argued with the guy for an hour and I couldn't convince him that just because he couldn't see the dust on the tape, that there wasn't any dust there.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I said, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, while we're talking about inspection, can you tell us a little bit about your mesh sizes, and if you're targeting a certain profile, which products you're going to want to go with? We'll also, below us right here on this little ticker, we'll put these numbers up there, but if you guys can help us out with that, that'd be great.
Sure. And our literature demonstrates what profiles we hit. Mm-hmm. Most of our plants offer mesh sizes of 1020, 2040, 4070, and 7100. Those are all SSPC, AB1, I think 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I guess for ease of conversation, if you need a 4 mil profile, use our coarse material. If you need something which most specs, say, oh, we need a 2 to 4. I would say use our medium coarse or 2040, because that's going to get you a really consist somewhere between 2.8 and 3.1 all day long. So that's really our go-to grade for dry blasting, because most specs, as you know, are right around a 3 mil profile, between 2 and 4. 4070 is our vapor grade, and it will get you 2.5. One of the awesome things that's overlooked about, I think is often overlooked about our 4070 vapor grade, is how effective it is dry blasting for coating removal.
Mhm.
It's a highly effective grade for, you're going to cut at any one time. And if there's an existing profile, 3, whatever, underneath the coating, it's not going to demonstrably degrade the underlying profile.
Mhm.
So that's a really good grade for coating removals.
If you guys, are there any applications that you would say kind of stay away from with the crushed glass that you guys really aren't cut out for, not your wheelhouse?
The only thing I would say is the really rare, really high profile stuff, where if somebody needs a 4.5, a 5, 6, it's really hard to consistently generate that high of a profile with glass.
Mm.
Yeah.
So with Blue Dog Blasting, we're nationwide, so I get phone calls all the time, and it always blows my mind, the diversity of the phone calls. Will it work for log cabins? Will it work for fiberglass? I'm blasting some weird fungus off of a brick. Would you say glass is still going to be a go-to that's going to be able to use on log homes, or fiberglass taking the paint off but not completely destroying the fiberglass? Or we've already talked about brick and concrete. Obviously, we've been talking about metal, but just kind of a good all around. There's really nothing besides that high spec profile. You could be using glass for pretty much everything.
Yeah, you really could. Glass has a lot of unique features. One is just its physics, its weight, and its hardness. The other is the angular to subangular structure of the grains. So you mentioned wood, you mentioned fiberglass. One of the beauties of our material is that you can run it at lower pressures, and you still get really good cutting of those kinds of materials that aren't as hard. You're removing maybe a gel coat from fiberglass, or you're wanting to restore a log home where the surface is soft. Well, you can adjust your pressures to run lower pressure, but you're still going to get a really good cutting action due to the grain structure of our material. So it's really forgiving on the softer materials, and that's why it works really good in auto body restoration. If you want to blast your car, you can really dial back your pressures, but you still will get that. I won't really call it a profile, but you'll get that surface finish that you need on sheet metal.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the physics of the material and the shape of the grains, and that's what makes crushed glass so effective on coating removal as well, is the grain structure, the angular to subangular shape. Most garnets are subangular.
Mm-hmm.
Our material is angular to subangular. You'll get some particles that are highly angular. You'll get some that are subangular. So it just has a really good grain structure shape.
And Sean, I would say that, you mentioned log home blasting to take stains off or recoat it or something like that. Really, there's a lot of people using our 7100 size for that. So when you talk about the really deep profiles in the 1020s and 1040s, the 7100 as well as 4070 in that marketplace, when you really don't want to, because it's softer, you don't really want to upset that substrate too much, but it takes stain off really fantastic. We get lots of pictures that people send us from restoring log homes in Michigan, Wisconsin, marketplaces like that. It's pretty big in.
Perfect. Yeah. Like I said, I get those questions all the time. So, like I said, doing my research, doing my homework, trying to be the best customer service provider when people call with these questions that are like, why would I know that?
Yeah.
Trying to find information. It's very difficult. Like I said, this industry's been around forever and we're still using the same materials. And I go to try to find, can you sandblast with glass on a log home? Opinions. You're not going to find facts. So
Right.
that's why, I really love to have guys like you in front of us ask those questions so that we now know, we're talking with the leaders in the industry that make the product and know what its capabilities are. And we just got an affirmative answer that yes, and use this specific one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really think glass has a wider area of usefulness than a lot of abrasives. Just because of, just what we just noted, the weight, the hardness, the shape of the grains, the different mesh sizes that we produce. You can use it from new tank construction. I've got a lot of customers in California that use it on ID cleaning of transmission pipe for oil and gas. It is a mainstream abrasive, and it's still that niche abrasive for the log homes, for the car guys, for the guys that are doing brick restoration and swimming pool work to remove calcium deposits. It's still that niche abrasive, but what I'd like to, if anything from this podcast today is to get out, is that it's also that go-to abrasive for the mainstream industrial coating contractor out there, for coating removal, for new construction.
Yep.
Yep.
It works on all of them.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to highlight, you mentioned that it's hard to find resources out there, Sean, but we've got a bunch of case studies that are listed on our website for log homes or wood restoration. One of the projects we're working on in Michigan is taking an old GM building and blasting off all the paint that's been there for years, and they're restoring that into like a mall or loft living. So there's lots of applications like that that we've done case studies on and put them on our website under the resources tab where people can go look at it. But to our point, we're kind of the new guy on the marketplace, right? Crushed glass hasn't been around as long as the garnets and the sands and the slags out there in the marketplace. So you talk about sort of redefining a marketplace. We're kind of that guy.
Yeah.
But,
so Kevin will have a link for that for you guys, or
okay.
for you guys.
Yeah, and I just, again, it's
so
where do you get
find
information? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that because we've done these case studies and what works best, and obviously our customer service office or ourselves, along with you guys with the knowledge that you guys have acquired over the years. It's, sometimes you see it, but sometimes it doesn't get posted out there of how can someone else find it.
That's right.
Yep.
Or it gets buried underneath the big guy stuff.
A little bit.
So, well, yeah, let's jump into this. What Sean said, recyclability. Crunch glass is supposed to be a one pass. I have plenty of customers that have tried and still recycle their glass. Can you tell us a little about your stance on that?
Well, my opinion is if we run our material at optimum, it's a single pass abrasive, because when it's breaking down and it's doing its physical thing on the substrate, you're not going to get a usable enough reclaim. It would be like you're mixing in 90% new. So it wouldn't be a benefit. It's a single pass abrasive. It really is.
Now, just in your opinion, knowing what we know, that optimizing Garnet, you're at 120 PSI, would that be considered a single pass abrasive as well?
Well, there's a lot of customers out there that are using Garnet at remote sites. They're tank builders, they're doing pipeline, whatever they're doing on remote job sites, and there is a high percentage of Garnet, high percentage of Garnet that is not reclaimed.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, the best way to, if you want to reclaim and you're a Garnet user, you need to have a blast room.
Yeah.
And your blast room is set up with a really state-of-the-art reclaim system.
Yeah, I would say that's across the board, no matter
Across the board.
what the abrasive is. Because man, I talk to people all over the place, and they're like, "Yeah, I just shovel it right on up with a big old shovel and throw it back in the pot."
Well, what
oh,
are you shooting back onto your surface is my thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
Are you doing your QC checks on your post blast surface?
Well, I get my follow-up question to that would be, if you're going to spend and invest, and I did a blog post on my website for this, you're going to invest thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, getting a blast room with a recovery system. Why are you going to use an abrasive that lasts 2, maybe 3 times?
Well, I guess it depends on what you're blasting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I guess you can't use steel grit on everything.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a myriad of different metals, you'd probably want to run some type of mineral abrasive.
Yeah.
But you would really still want to run something that would give you multiple passes if you're going to invest, $200,000 in a blast room.
Yeah.
And if you're running, if you're running in that blast room and you're running optimal, because blast rooms, your compressor's right there, you got a super short hose length. You can basically run at any pressure you want in that blast room, so you can optimize your blasting.
Any issues or regulations on the cleanup, since it is perfect for a single pass when optimized at 100 PSI? Is there any special needs for cleanup as far as environmental impacts or anything? I know we've kind of talked about being inert and silica free, and then it's basically just a product that's environmentally friendly. Do we have to clean it up afterwards?
Well, I guess it would be area by area. What are the laws and regulations in a given area where it's being used? But the abrasive itself, as you just mentioned, is completely inert. It depends on, if you're doing a coating removal, it depends on the coating, what's in the material. Usually our contractors, our customers dispose of our material like they would anything else that's inert. If Garnet goes to a landfill, ours would go to a landfill. We had the state of Florida actually it was Broward County, do a study on crushed glass sand. And this study found that recycled crushed glass is appropriate to be used as beach erosion fill. That it has no adverse effect on marine life, yada, yada. So I would say if a contractor is blasting in a given area, and in order to dispose of it in a landfill, they first have to have it checked. Well, then you have to have it checked. Mm-hmm. But the material itself is completely inert. It depends on what you're blasting.
Perfect.
Well, and
but I do have some guys that have said, man, my cleanup was a breeze. You couldn't even really tell there was material. It blended into the dirt.
Oh,
because it's a cream color, right?
Yep.
yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to mention, Rick. When you think about what our product looks like, again, when we're talking about disposal, it'll pass a T-clip easily, right? But depending on what your substrate is, some of those early paints that were lead-based, you would have to do some cleanup perspective that's more than just landfill.
Yeah.
So, again, it passes all the T-clips, and to Rick's point, if you can dispose it just like any other material, you can take this to the landfill as well. So, but the interesting thing is when you look at what's coming out of the nozzle, and then not to mention what the substrate is, it looks like beach sand by the time you're done with it. I did a blast test just this last week at a precast facility, and you look at the ground and it's completely dark. And then by the time we got done doing our blast test, I said, look at this, guys, it looks like we just went to the beach. So from that perspective, when you're in refineries or high profile jobs, you really don't have to worry about that cleanup, even from a visual perspective, because it looks just like normal sand that you would see that's created off sidewalks or whatever. So
Yep.
It blends in a little bit more, and obviously whatever's on the substrate is really what matters from a coatings removal perspective.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. It's very remedial, but I do want to kind of mention, because some guys have never used glass, they've only heard about it and stuff like that. I've even had somebody say, well, I don't want to use that stuff, it'll cut the hell out of my hands. And so I know we have talked about it being very angular, and it does cut into the material very well and will remove everything. I do want to just tell the listeners out there, you can put it in your hands and rub it like that, and you're not going to be all cut up.
I do that every time I bring material to a new blast test to a new customer, and that is a question that they have. Is this stuff going to cut my blasters? And I'll open up the super sack, I'll put my hand in, and I'll rub it literally as hard as I can, and look, no blood.
No.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's that's a myth. I mean,
that is the myth that's out there, right? And the other one
Yeah.
that's out there, which is always interesting to me, is when I get done blasting with it, my guys are itchy because they equate it to fiberglass insulation.
Yeah.
And so if you've ever put fiberglass insulation up into a house, right, you can feel that stuff into your lungs and into your hands, and it makes you itchy. But this is a whole different perspective. We're talking about crushed glass beads versus very fine, and you can see it in fiberglass shingles. I used to be in the roofing industry. You could, by the time I'd get done, you could
like
feel your
hairs.
fingertips were off because it's rubbing against that asphalt and that fiberglass in those shingles. So it's a whole different situation when we're talking about itchiness, like fiberglass insulation, because I've heard that from guys. They're like, our guys don't want to test it because it makes them itch. And I'm like, well, aren't they using the right PPE anyway?
Yeah.
I haven't
So
heard
that myth is out there as well, that it doesn't itch. And we do a lot of blast tests ourselves at our Houston facilities as well as on site. And I've never come home itching, but
it's all psychological.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I would guess kind of to wrap up what I have, and Sean might have some more. I don't know how many other crushed glass manufacturers are out there, but I guess briefly, what would you guys say is the what of TruAbrasives? Why would somebody want to buy from you versus crushed glass XYZ down the street? What is it about you guys?
yeah, I can take that. Basically, again, for us, it's really logistics and the glass that we actually receive into our facilities. We've got strict requirements that don't let us take CRT glass, which is your computer screens and your television screens. We don't take light bulb glass. We take some plate glass, and the majority of our product is that soda lime bottle glass that you would see in your wine bottles and beer bottles and spirits, mayonnaise jars and things like that. So we control the incoming that we get. Our cleaning processes, like we talked about a little bit before, get out all the things that you don't. But really, for TruAbrasives and strategic materials, we're the largest glass recycler in North America. So, from a footprint perspective and a plant perspective, we can get product to you a lot better than maybe a couple regional players that are out there that do produce glass abrasives. So it's the strict controls, it's the processes, and really it's a logistic footprint. So that's why I would say you'd probably want to trust Tru over somebody else.
Cool. Any new products on the horizon for the blast industry as far as abrasives? Anything special, new shapes, geometries, sizes?
Yeah, we've actually looked at a couple things.
I'm sorry, Senator, I have no recollection of that.
There is some pretty interesting things out there, but that we've had an opportunity to look at, but we can't really talk about them because we're under non-disclosures. But the one thing I may have forgot to mention is that we are getting into the filtration products. So where you would traditionally put sand in a sand filter, we are bringing out a product, launched a product called TruFiltration, because crushed glass is a really good replacement against silica sand. Obviously, when you're pouring that stuff into your filter, you've got that dust that comes up from silica sand. So there's a lot of companies getting away from that. So we've launched a filtration product to replace that. And the cleanability of this stuff compared to silica sand is actually pretty impressive.
Cool.
Glass, because of its lightness in the backwash process, can allow to save chemicals and backwash time. So it's a really cool product that we just introduced. We're trying to get it into some major distributors from that perspective, but not necessarily the abrasive blasting side of it. But we're looking at our plants and trying to increase our footprint constantly out there to better our serviceability for where your customers may be. So those are the things that we're looking at on the abrasive side of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If I could say one last thing to speak to those painting contractors and industrial surface prep guys out there that haven't tried glass, and they are probably still under the operating under the old myths and misconceptions that glass is a niche product. It doesn't cut as fast. It's whatever. We're here to tell you that it really is a go-to abrasive. It will work side by side with any of the mainstream abrasives out there, whether it's copper slag, coal slag, nickel slag, garnet. It will work side by side with those, and we're here to make the offer that we will sample you material as needed. We will be on site for testing. We'll be there to prove what we're saying, and we're ready to do that. We've got extra capacity with our new lines that we've just put on over the last year, and we're not out there just to compete against other glass people, because those are pretty rare. There's only a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
We're out there to compete against the all those grandfathered abrasives that everybody's used for 100 years.
Yep.
And we're ready to say, hey, there's something better out there, and we believe it's this.
I'd say those people out there that want to talk about what they're doing for the environment, let's put your money where your mouth is and stop using a product that can't be recycled, that's pulled from the earth, and
Right.
go to something that's recycled and responsible.
Yeah, funny you should say that, Kevin. I just posted on LinkedIn, I think it was last night. Aramco put a big posting on LinkedIn yesterday about what they're doing for a particular species in the desert, and their big push is to be eco-friendly and climate friendly. And so I posted in a big comment onto their posting about Aramco is one of the largest users of Garnet abrasives, and where Garnet comes from and how it's mined and all this kind of stuff. And I've gotten a lot of likes so far on that post. I haven't gotten any mentions or comments from Aramco yet. So
yeah, I got it right
We'll
here.
see.
I got it right here.
I was going to say,
Ah,
usually they send the cease and desist certified mail. So.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I really like that. I knew once I read that. I've read some other posts where you talk kind of about why not use a recycled product when we're in the need of talking about being responsible and our footprint and everything. And I knew when I read that, I was like, all right, he's kind of in the same headspace I am with the crushed glass versus the other stuff out there. So
Yeah, I'm starting to get a lot of traction. We're starting to get a lot of traction on that messaging in Southeast Asia, because whatever your stance is on climate change, global warming, whatever, that area of the world is embracing. They're embracing everything. They're embracing oil and gas, LNG, wind power, solar. They're all of the above. So if they can, I'm getting a lot of traction on this beneficial reuse for surface prep. So,
that's good.
I like your mindset on that. That's
but yeah, and we
awesome.
we need to see some more of. I'm thoroughly impressed with your participation, you know, in the engaging in conversation on LinkedIn, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of it out there from other guys. And I appreciate you doing it. It's definitely a way I get a lot of my knowledge is through the guys like you that had the years experience and kind of put that out there. So appreciate it. It's not going unnoticed, and
thank you.
Somebody get this guy a raise.
God, I like you.
Laura's got to get you.
I knew I liked you.
A little bit extra money for marketing for all the work you're doing out there.
I agree with that. He spends a lot of time doing it. He's texting me on Sundays. I'm like, dude, you need to go to church. He's out posting LinkedIn and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I am hearing, and I don't know why I'm hearing this, but especially in kind of the Virginia shipyards, that a lot of these guys are looking to, they're not real active at doing it, but they're talking about getting away from garnet, and they're looking for other alternatives to the garnet. So I don't know if that has anything to do with the beryllium. I don't know anything about the beryllium in garnet, if there is.
Well, let me give a little bit of insight into the garnet thing. One, and I think I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, how the supply chain has really come under pressure in the last few years from all the illegal mining in India. And the southeast of India still has tremendous garnet reserves. But they've cracked down on the mining so hard there because there's another mineral in all those deposits over there that is used in bills for the clear industry. And so there's been a lot of illegal mining and a lot of black market exporting over there. So the Indian government has finally cracked down on it. So the garnet supply itself has come under tremendous pressure. And then we've seen China step up on hard rock materials, and the material is not very good. And the price to get it over here to the US, the container ships and the break bulk, the cost of freight has more than doubled. So the price of garnet is, and if like we talked about the whole optimization thing, if you're not running it at absolute optimization that you can, you're paying $600 a ton for something that you could pay $300 for.
Yeah.
And not getting any better results.
Yeah.
So your supply is being pressured, your price is going up, and I mean those are the two factors.
Yeah. Well, that explains why I'd spend a lot of time searching and seeking out blast test videos, and that's why I try to do as many as possible, because I just don't see a lot of them, especially third-party ones. But I don't see any that show a comparison between garnet and crushed glass. It seems like they don't want to put that out there. I'll see tons of garnet versus slag. You know,
have you looked at their YouTube channel, Kev?
I said other than us.
Yeah, us being the group.
Yeah,
us.
yeah. And I mean, technically, we are third party. I sell garnet just like I sell crushed glass.
We're not manufacturers or anything like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So
yeah, I've got a picture that I have on my phone from 2 years ago. We pull into this small fabrication yard in Manila, in the Philippines, and they're fairly busy. They do a lot of work around the region, and they wanted to see what crushed glass was about. So we blasted a couple of small, like 4x4 panels. And those pictures I carry around on my phone, I show them to everybody. One is gray, one is white. And I ask him, what do you think blasted those panels? I don't even tell him.
Yeah.
I'll send you a copy of that. It's amazing.
Awesome.
It's amazing.
What we need to do is like a Coke or Pepsi test, right?
Yeah.
Blindfold people, blast some panels, and then show them which one do you think it was.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, that reminds me. So what about flash rust? Are you seeing any extended periods after you blast with crushed glass? So we've done some testing with, I said 10X Jet Mag, 2 abrasives that we've used that when you blast dry, they seem to hold off the flash rust for a considerable amount of time compared to Garnet and Slag.
Glass is very similar to that, Kevin. And here's an anecdotal story, and you're probably I was at a yard in Malaysia. This was a little over 2 years ago. It was one of my first trips over there. And we're doing dry blast testing, we're doing vapor blast testing, we're doing everything. So we've got these big 40-foot I-beams undercover, and the guys blasting them and everything. And we had a big crowd there. And we get done, and everybody's, yay, it was great, we love it. And then we had to go to a McDermott yard in Indonesia. We come back 10 days later, they had moved that I-beam into under another cover because they had to blast some stuff. 10 days later, we came back and that I-beam was white.
Wow.
And that was in Malaysia. So I don't know if it was just the way we blasted or what, but that's an anecdotal story. There was no flash rust on that surface.
Well, Sean and I are going to try to duplicate a test in a little country called Sanford, North Carolina. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Sean, that should be the first demo test we do is just get out there and see how long that'll last.
Okay, cool.
I was actually thinking the exact same thing. As we've done side by side with a couple things, but let's set something up and just nail every abrasive we've got our hands on and see which one rusts and just set up the time lapse cameras.
Works for me.
Actually, we did that in our Houston yard. We had a 4x8 panel, and we chalked off 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom, and took those different abrasives and did it.
Mhm.
And amazingly, that white metal finish that we produced above anybody else was just it. In fact, it opened my eyes.
Yeah.
Because
But
we've
you're
never done those
completely
side-by-side
biased, though.
comparisons before.
Yeah,
And I was like, and I had heard that silica sand, really does a good job, and it wasn't even close to what crushed glass was. I was shocked.
Well, it's spherical instead of angular.
Right,
Correct. Yeah.
right.
I think a lot of people are still using just regular old sand just because of price and availability.
Agreed. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
totally.
Well, cool. Anything else you guys want to cover here?
No, guys, I really appreciate the opportunity to even just talk to you guys and be on your guys' platform. So thank you guys for reaching out.
All the appreciation is over on
Yeah.
this side. If it weren't for guys like you, it would just be me and Kevin talking, and nobody wants to hear that.
I do. In fact, I enjoy you guys. I think we should do this like every couple of weeks.
Hey,
I like watching your guys' stuff. You guys are like the Joe Rogan of blasting.
Right on, baby.
I think Sean thinks we're more like, what is it? Tim the Toolman Taylor? And,
Yeah,
Hey,
you're
there
like
you go.
Al Borland.
I'm Ale Borland. Nice.
But
That's
we
awesome.
definitely appreciate it. It's awesome guests like you guys that are leading the industry. Appreciate that you guys are doing a lot of the testing, taking a stance for the environment, offering a good quality product that not only do you test and make sure that it's awesome for your customers, but you also explain how to use it properly so that it's optimized for that customer and they can make the best performance out of that product so that they're saving money on the back end and making more money on the front. And it's an environmentally safe and sound product that they can use that keeps them safe. It keeps the environment healthy. And we're actually kind of doing a little bit of good because we're recycling materials instead of digging them out of the earth. So we definitely love what you guys are doing over at TruAbrasives. And from standpoint of where we are in the industry, dealing with customers and everything else, I would say that I would think glass is probably one of the most, from who I've been talking to and who I deal with as a customer base. And I think it's just going to go up from there because I've heard the testimonials, I've used it in a bunch of different videos that we've done in the past, and we're going to continue to do it. And now we've just got even more tests to do now.
Awesome.
But it's a great product, and we definitely recommend it to our customers. And as far as the crushed glass product goes, we really appreciate what TruAbrasive is doing, and we recommend you guys. And thank you guys for coming on. And as always, get out there and blast.
Get out there and blast.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Come on, Rick, get
Thank you
out
for
there
your
and
time.
blast.
Appreciate it. Get out
Get
there
out
and
there.
blast.
Yeah.
See you guys. Thanks.
Oh, you're not gonna say it?
See
Get out there and blast. Let's
Get out
go.
there and blast.
Blue Dog Radio. Get out there and blast. Or whatever. I don't care.